I stood alone beside a deserted gas station in Oklahoma, clutching a paper cup of cold coffee, while my son's SUV disappeared into the dark highway. Nicole had smiled sweetly when she asked me to run inside for headache medicine. By the time I came back out, they were gone. My purse was still in the car. My phone battery blinked at 1%. Then a convoy of Silverline freight trucks roared past me, their silver logos glowing beneath the highway lights. And I almost laughed through my tears. Because the family who abandoned me that night had no idea the company they were driving to celebrate belonged to me. Before we continue, I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever felt invisible to the people you sacrificed everything for? Please share your story or opinion in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. If stories about family betrayal and second chances touch your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep sharing this journey together. People see an old woman with gray hair and quiet eyes, and they assume her life has become small. They assume her story is already over. What they never see are the decades hidden behind those wrinkles. The sleepless nights, the sacrifices, the dreams buried so deeply beneath motherhood that eventually even the woman herself forgets they ever existed. My name is Harper Rodriguez, and for most of my life, I was proud of being invisible. I met my husband Michael when I was 22 years old in San Antonio, Texas. Back then, he drove a battered 18-wheeler for a shipping company that barely paid enough to cover rent. I worked the night shift at a diner off Interstate 35 pouring coffee for exhausted truckers while studying bookkeeping from library books during my breaks. We were poor. Not the kind of poor people romanticize in movies. Real poor. The kind where you pray your car starts in winter because you can't afford repairs. The kind where you buy canned soup in bulk because it stretches for days. The kind where your electricity gets shut off once and you spend years terrified it could happen again. But Michael had dreams bigger than our circumstances. I don't want to spend my life building somebody else's company, he used to tell me, while we sat on the hood of his truck late at night. I want to build something that belongs to us. I believed him. Not because he was rich or educated. He wasn't. I believed him because Michael Rodriguez never quit on anything in his life. When Ryan was born, things became even harder. Michael drove longer routes. I stopped sleeping more than 4 hours a night. During the day, I cared for our baby. At night, I worked double shifts. Sometimes Michael and I barely saw each other, except when exchanging Ryan in the apartment parking lot. But every spare dollar went into one thing: a trucking company. Our trucking company. Silverline Freight started with one used truck that broke down almost every month. Michael drove it himself while I handled invoices, contracts, payroll, and customer calls from our tiny kitchen table. I still remember balancing accounting books with Ryan sleeping in my lap. I remember nursing him while negotiating delivery contracts over the phone. I remember crying quietly in the bathroom after banks rejected our loan applications over and over again. You don't have enough collateral. Too risky. Maybe try again next year. But we didn't stop. Michael used to kiss my forehead and say, "One day, Ryan will never struggle the way we did." That sentence became our religion. For years, we built Silverline one delivery at a time. And slowly, somehow, it worked. More trucks came, then more drivers, then warehouses. The company grew faster than we ever imagined. But success came with a price. Michael was working nearly non-stop by then. He ignored chest pain for months because he was terrified of slowing down. One rainy November morning, he collapsed beside his truck at a distribution center outside Dallas. By the time I got to the hospital, he was gone. I was 39 years old. Ryan was 14. And overnight, the entire weight of the company and my family fell onto my shoulders. I thought about selling everything. God knows I wanted to. But then I looked at my son sitting in the funeral home wearing his father's suit jacket because we couldn't afford another one. And I knew I couldn't let Michael's dream die. So I kept going. I became someone harder after Michael died. Not cruel, just tired. I attended board meetings all day and cried alone at night after Ryan went to sleep. I learned how to negotiate contracts with men who assumed a widow wouldn't understand business. I fought lawsuits, managed expansions, signed deals worth millions while wondering whether Ryan had eaten dinner. And through it all, I protected my son from the truth. Ryan never knew how much of Silverline belonged to me. I never wanted him growing up spoiled or entitled. I wanted him to earn things honestly. For a while, he did. When Ryan was younger, he adored me. He used to leave little notes in my purse that said, "Love you, Mom." On weekends, he'd sit in my office pretending to help sort papers while eating vending machine candy. After he graduated college, I quietly arranged for him to get a position at Silverline without revealing my ownership. I wanted him to succeed on merit, not because he was the founder's son. At first, I was proud of him. He worked hard. People respected him. Then he met Nicole. The first time I saw her, she looked me up and down with polite judgment, hidden behind a perfect smile. Nicole came from a family obsessed with appearances. Expensive neighborhoods, country clubs, designer handbags. People like me made her uncomfortable. At first, Ryan defended me. But little by little, something changed. It happened so slowly, I almost missed it. Ryan stopped calling as often. Then he stopped visiting unless I invited myself. Eventually, after I sold my house during one of Silverline's restructuring investments, Ryan insisted I move into their home temporarily. Temporary turned into 3 years. Nicole converted a storage room near the laundry area into my bedroom. "It's cozy," she said brightly the day I moved in. I still remember standing there holding my suitcase while staring at shelves full of Christmas decorations beside my bed. Cozy. That room had no window. I told myself it didn't matter. At least I was close to family. At least I could hear Emma laughing downstairs sometimes. Emma was the only reason those years didn't completely break my heart. My granddaughter still hugged me like I mattered. Still asked about my stories. Still sat beside me in the kitchen while I baked sweet bread from my mother's recipe. But even Emma noticed the tension, especially at dinner. Nicole would criticize the way I dressed, the way I folded towels, the way I spoke. "She means well," Ryan would whisper afterward. But he never once told his wife to stop. Not once. That hurt more than the insults themselves. The night before we left for the Silverline anniversary gala, I was sitting quietly folding laundry when my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Olivia Bennett. I quickly silenced it, but Nicole noticed. "You're awfully secretive these days," she said while sipping wine in the kitchen. "Who keeps calling you?" "No one important," I answered softly. Ryan barely looked up from his laptop. "You ready for tomorrow?" he asked me casually. This gala could change everything for my career. I smiled faintly. "Oh, I think tomorrow will change many things, Ryan." He didn't even notice the sadness in my voice. The morning of the Silverline anniversary gala began with tension so thick I could feel it before I even opened my bedroom door. I had been awake since 5:30, long before anyone else in the house. Old habits die hard. Years of managing trucks, driver schedules, and emergencies trained my body to wake before sunrise. I sat quietly on the edge of my small bed in the converted storage room, smoothing the wrinkles from my navy blue dress. It was simple, modest, a little old-fashioned perhaps, but it had once belonged to my mother, and somehow wearing it made me feel less alone. When I finally stepped into the kitchen, Nicole glanced up from her espresso machine and froze. Oh, she said slowly, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. You're wearing that? I forced a small smile. It's my nicest dress. Nicole exchanged a look with Ryan, who sat at the counter scrolling through emails on his phone. The gala is at the Grand Crescent Hotel, Nicole said carefully, as if speaking to a child. There are going to be executives there. Investors? Media people? I nodded gently. I understand. Nicole set her coffee cup down a little too hard. I just think maybe we should have bought you something more modern. Ryan sighed without looking up. Mom looks fine, Nicole. The words should have comforted me. Instead, they sounded exhausted, like he was already embarrassed before we had even left the house. Nicole walked closer and adjusted the collar of my dress with sharp little movements. At least let me fix this, she muttered. You can't go looking like you wandered out of a church basement. I stood still while she tugged at the fabric. Humiliation becomes strangely quiet when you've lived with it long enough. Emma entered the kitchen a moment later, backpack slung over one shoulder, even though it was Saturday. Her face lit up when she saw me. Grandma, you look beautiful. Nicole rolled her eyes immediately. She's being sweet, she said to Ryan. That dress is older than I am. Emma frowned. So what? Emma Ryan warned softly. But Emma crossed her arms. At least Grandma doesn't care about showing off all the time. Nicole's expression tightened instantly. Watch your tone. The room fell silent. I stepped forward before the argument could grow worse. It's all right, I said quietly. We don't want to be late. The drive to Oklahoma City took nearly 3 hours. Nicole spent most of it talking about the gala. Who might be there? Which executives mattered? Which wives dressed elegantly? Which people Ryan needed to impress? You know, Charles Whitmore is expected to announce a major leadership expansion tonight, she said excitedly from the passenger seat. This could finally be Ryan's moment. Ryan gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to hide his anticipation. I'm not assuming anything he said, but I could hear hope buried underneath his voice. Silverline Freight had grown enormously over the years. Regional hubs, international contracts, thousands of employees. Ryan had worked his way into upper management honestly. That part had always made me proud. What broke my heart was how desperately he needed validation now. Not from himself, from people like Nicole. As the highway stretched endlessly ahead of us, I found myself recognizing familiar routes. Distribution roads, old shipping corridors. Areas where Michael and I used to stop for gas during overnight hauls decades ago. Every mile carried memories. There's a new Silverline warehouse near Tulsa now, Ryan said casually. Huge facility, fully automated. I know, I answered softly. He glanced at me briefly in the rear-view mirror. You do? I nodded. They expanded there 2 years ago after acquiring Red Hawk Logistics. Ryan blinked in surprise. That wasn't exactly public information. Nicole laughed lightly. Oh, please. Harper watches business documentaries all day. She probably saw something online. I looked out the window instead of responding. The truth was, I had personally approved that acquisition during a board meeting 18 months earlier. But saying that aloud would only raise questions I wasn't ready to answer. Emma leaned closer beside me in the back seat. Grandma, she whispered, how do you know so much about Silverline? Before I could answer, Nicole interrupted. Because your grandmother likes pretending she understands corporate business. That one hurt more than usual. Not because it was cruel. Because once upon a time, Ryan would have defended me immediately. Now, he simply kept driving. We stopped briefly at a roadside diner outside Tulsa for lunch. Nicole spent most of the meal criticizing everything around her. The coffee, the service, the decor. Meanwhile, Emma quietly shared fries with me under the table, because Nicole complained I was ordering too much fried food at my age. I noticed the guilt in Emma's eyes. Children always notice more than adults think. Back in the SUV, the tension worsened as the afternoon passed. Ryan rehearsed conversations for the gala out loud. If Charles mentions expansion strategy, I'll bring up the Midwest restructuring numbers. Nicole nodded approvingly. And make sure you mention your leadership metrics from the Dallas division. Ryan glanced at me suddenly. You'll be okay tonight, right, Mom? I smiled faintly. What do you mean? You know, he hesitated awkwardly. This is a very formal event. Nicole jumped in immediately. He means don't wander off telling random stories to executives. Emma groaned loudly. Mom, Nicole ignored her. I'm serious. These events matter. Ryan's future matters. I turned slowly toward the window again before answering. My entire life has been about Ryan's future. The car became quiet after that. A few miles later, we passed one of the oldest Silver Line trucking yards in the state. I stared at it as we drove by. The faded blue gates, the loading docks, the old brick office building. Michael and I had stood there together on opening day 23 years ago, holding cheap paper cups of champagne because we couldn't afford real glasses. My chest tightened painfully at the memory. Funny thing about success, I said softly, almost to myself. Ryan frowned. What I looked at him carefully through the mirror. Sometimes people climb so high they forget who held the ladder steady. Nicole exhaled dramatically. Oh God, not one of your life lessons again? Ryan rubbed his forehead tiredly. Mom, can we please just enjoy one evening without making everything emotional? That sentence stayed with me the rest of the drive. Without making everything emotional. As though motherhood itself wasn't emotional. As though sacrifice wasn't emotional. As though spending your entire life building something for your child only to become an inconvenience somehow wasn't emotional. The sun was beginning to set when the skyline of Oklahoma City finally appeared ahead of us. The Grand Crescent Hotel shimmered in gold evening light, like something out of another world. Luxury cars filled the entrance. Valets hurried across marble pavement. People in designer suits laughed beneath towering chandeliers visible through the glass lobby. Nicole straightened excitedly in her seat. This is it, she whispered. Ryan smiled nervously. Emma reached for my hand quietly. But as I stared at the massive Silver Line freight banner hanging across the hotel entrance, a strange feeling settled deep in my chest. Not fear, not anger. Something heavier. The painful understanding that before this night ended, my family would finally learn who I really was, and nothing between us would ever be the same again. By the time we crossed into western Oklahoma, the excitement inside the SUV had completely shifted. Nicole was fixing her makeup using the passenger mirror for the third time in 20 minutes. Ryan kept checking his phone for work emails, barely paying attention to the road anymore. Even Emma had grown quiet, earbuds dangling loosely around her neck while she stared out the window. And me. I sat in the back seat, watching the sky darken above the highway, feeling a heaviness in my chest I couldn't explain. Maybe part of me already knew what was coming. The GPS announced a rest stop ahead. We should stop, Nicole said immediately. I need to fix my hair before we get there. Ryan nodded tiredly. Fine. 10 minutes. The gas station appeared almost abandoned when we pulled in. It sat alone beside a stretch of empty highway surrounded by flat land and dying grass. Half the overhead lights flickered weakly against the evening sky. A lonely little place people stopped at, only because they had no better option. Ryan parked near the side of the building. Nicole turned toward me with an exaggerated sigh. Harper, can you run inside and grab me some aspirin? My head is killing me. Of course, I answered automatically. Years of motherhood train you to respond before thinking. Nicole handed me a $20 bill without meeting my eyes. And maybe get Emma a water, too. Emma immediately spoke up. I can go with Grandma. No, Nicole snapped too quickly. Stay here. I noticed the look that passed silently between Nicole and Ryan. Brief, cold, almost rehearsed. Something inside me tightened, but I ignored it. I stepped out of the SUV, slowly smoothing my dress against the wind. The evening air had grown colder, carrying the smell of gasoline and rain somewhere far away. As I walked toward the station entrance, I glanced back once. Ryan was staring at his phone. Nicole was whispering something to him. Emma was watching me through the rear window. The expression on her face unsettled me. Worry. Inside the station was nearly empty, except for a young cashier stocking shelves near the coffee machines. Country music played softly through old ceiling speakers. I grabbed aspirin, water, and out of habit, a small pack of peanut butter crackers for Emma. When you spend decades loving someone, you never really stop taking care of them, even when they stop taking care of you. At the counter, the cashier smiled politely. That all for you tonight, ma'am? Yes, I said softly. I reached into my cardigan pocket for the $20 bill. Nothing. I checked again. Then my other pocket. My stomach dropped. Nicole had never actually handed me the money. Oh, I whispered. You okay? The cashier asked gently. I think I left my money in the car. He smiled kindly. No problem. Happens all the time. Embarrassment flooded through me anyway. I'll just go get it. I stepped back outside and froze. The parking space was empty. For one strange second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. I looked left, right, toward the gas pumps. Nothing. The SUV was gone. A cold wave spread through my entire body. No, 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 no. I hurried forward toward the edge of the parking lot, scanning the dark highway desperately. Then I saw it. Far ahead in the distance, the faint red glow of taillights disappearing into the night. My son had left me. I stood there motionless while the realization settled into my chest like a stone. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe Ryan didn't realize I wasn't back in the car yet. Maybe Nicole distracted him. Maybe they would turn around in a minute. 5 minutes passed, then 10. No headlights returned. My hands began shaking. I reached instinctively for my purse to call Ryan, but my purse was still inside the SUV, along with my medication, my identification, everything. All I had was my nearly dead phone tucked inside my cardigan pocket. 1% battery. My fingers trembled as I dialed Ryan's number. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail? Again. Nothing. Then finally a text message appeared. We'll send someone later. Stay there. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just stay there. Like I was luggage accidentally forgotten at an airport. I stared at the message until the screen blurred from tears. The station door creaked open behind me. You all right, ma'am? The young cashier stepped outside carrying a steaming paper cup. Up close, he looked maybe 23 or 24 years old. Thin build, kind eyes, exhausted face. The kind of face you trust immediately. My family? I stopped speaking because suddenly I couldn't breathe properly. They left. His expression changed instantly. What? They drove away. He looked toward the empty highway in disbelief. You mean by accident? I opened my mouth to answer. But no words came out, because deep down, I already knew the truth. No, this wasn't an accident. The young man handed me the coffee carefully. Here, he said softly. You look freezing. Thank you. My name's Tyler, he added. You got anybody I can call for you? I stared down at the coffee cup, warming my hands. For a moment, I almost lied, almost pretended this was all some misunderstanding. But exhaustion finally broke through the last fragile piece of pride inside me. "My son left me here," I whispered. Tyler looked horrified. "Jesus, he's probably just busy," I added automatically, still trying to protect Ryan even now. Tyler didn't answer, because even strangers could recognize cruelty when they saw it. A gust of wind swept across the parking lot, and I suddenly realized how cold I truly was. Tyler glanced at my shaking hands. "Come inside," he said gently. "You shouldn't sit out here alone." Inside the station, he led me toward a small booth near the coffee machines. "You sure there's nobody else you can call?" I hesitated, then slowly reached for my phone again. The screen dimmed warningly. One call left, maybe. Only one person came to mind. Not because she was powerful, because she was loyal. I looked up at Tyler. "May I borrow your phone?" "Of course." He handed it over immediately. "Who do you need?" My fingers paused above the keypad for half a second before dialing a number I knew by heart. The line rang only once. Then a calm female voice answered. "Olivia Bennett speaking." I closed my eyes briefly. "It's Harper." The silence on the other end changed instantly. Harper Olivia's voice sharpened with concern. "What happened?" I swallowed hard. For the first time all night, the pain finally cracked through my composure. "They left me behind." A stunned silence followed. Then Olivia spoke again, her voice suddenly ice cold. "Tell me where you are." Olivia Bennett had worked beside me for nearly 20 years. In all that time, I had only heard panic in her voice twice. The first time was the day Michael died. The second was now. "Tell me where you are," she repeated sharper this time. I looked around the small gas station, nervously, suddenly aware of how surreal the entire situation felt. "Off Interstate 40, I said quietly. "Near Elk City, I think." "What happened?" I glanced toward Tyler, who stood nearby, pretending not to listen while wiping down the coffee counter. I lowered my voice anyway. "Ryan and Nicole left me here." Silence. Then a slow inhale. "You mean accidentally?" I closed my eyes. "No." Olivia's tone changed immediately. The warmth vanished, replaced by the controlled calm she used during corporate crises. "Are you safe?" "Yes." "Are you hurt?" "No." "Good. Stay exactly where you are. I'm sending a car immediately." "That's not necessary." "It absolutely is necessary." Her voice softened slightly. "Harper, the board is already asking questions. Charles has delayed the opening remarks twice, waiting for you." I rubbed my forehead tiredly. I never should have agreed to come tonight. "Yes, you should have," Olivia replied firmly. "This company exists because of you." My throat tightened painfully. Not because of the company, because those words were something I hadn't heard from family in a very long time. "You don't need to involve the police," I said after a moment. Tyler glanced toward me again at that sentence. Olivia sounded stunned. "They abandoned a 67-year-old woman at a roadside gas station. They're still my family." Another silence, longer this time. Finally, Olivia spoke carefully. "You have spent your entire life protecting people who never protected you back." I stared down at the paper coffee cup, warming my hands. Maybe she was right. But motherhood does strange things to a person. Even after betrayal, part of your heart still searches desperately for excuses. Maybe Ryan had panicked. Maybe Nicole convinced him this was temporary. Maybe... No. Deep down I knew better. "I'll handle this myself," I whispered. Olivia exhaled slowly. "The car will arrive in 45 minutes. Security team included. That's excessive." "No, Harper," she said coldly. What happened to you tonight stopped being excessive the moment your son drove away. The call ended a few moments later. When I handed Tyler his phone back, his expression had completely changed. Not pity anymore. Curiosity, concern, confusion. "You got security coming?" he asked cautiously. I attempted a small smile. Something like that. He leaned against the counter carefully. "Ma'am, I don't mean to pry, but who exactly are you?" For a second, I considered lying again. It would have been easier, safer, but I was too exhausted for masks tonight. "My name is Harper Rodriguez." He nodded politely, clearly, waiting for the important part. I looked toward the dark highway outside the window before continuing. "I helped build Silverline Freight." Tyler blinked. "The trucking company?" "Yes." "You mean, like you worked there?" A sad little laugh escaped me. "Something like that, too." His eyes narrowed slowly as realization began forming. "You're not just some employee, are you?" I didn't answer directly. Instead, I asked, "Do you know anything about Silverline?" "Sure," he said. "Everybody around here does. Huge company." He paused. "My dad drove for them before he got sick." I looked at him more carefully then. There was exhaustion behind his eyes. Adult exhaustion. The kind young people carry when life forced them to grow up too quickly. "He passed away last year," Tyler added quietly. "Cancer. I'm sorry." He shrugged, though the pain behind it was obvious. "Mom works nights at a nursing home now. I picked up shifts here to help out." Something twisted painfully inside me. Because Tyler reminded me of Ryan before ambition and pride hardened him. Kind, respectful, still human. Tyler suddenly frowned. "Wait." His eyes widened slightly. "The gala tonight. They've been advertising some big founder celebration thing all week." I stayed silent. His mouth opened slowly. "Oh my God." I gave him a tired smile. "Please don't make a scene out of it. You own the company?" The words sounded ridiculous even to him. I looked down at my hands. Hands worn softer with age now, but once cracked and bleeding from unloading freight beside Michael in freezing winters. Most of it, I admitted quietly. Tyler stared at me like he couldn't decide whether to apologize or panic. "And your family left you here?" I nodded once. "That's insane." I smiled faintly again, though it hurt. "Money doesn't protect people from loneliness, Tyler." For a while, neither of us spoke. Country music continued humming softly through the old speakers, while trucks rumbled along the distant highway outside. Finally, Tyler sat across from me. "So what happens now?" Good question. What did happen now? For years, I had carefully separated my family from my business life. Ryan never knew the extent of my ownership because I wanted him to earn success honestly. No special treatment, no inherited power. I wanted him to become a good man before becoming a powerful one. Somewhere along the way, I failed at the first part. "He thinks tonight is going to change his career?" I said softly. Tyler hesitated. "You still care about protecting him, don't you?" The answer came instantly. "Yes, and that was the tragedy of motherhood. Your heart keeps loving long after your pride should walk away." My phone suddenly buzzed weakly in my pocket before the screen went black completely. Battery dead. A strange calm settled over me after that. Like some final thread had snapped. No more pretending. No more shrinking myself to make other people comfortable. I looked around the tiny gas station. Faded linoleum floors, old coffee machines, cheap fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. And suddenly, against all logic, I remembered another night almost 40 years ago. Michael and I sitting inside a gas station, very much like this one, after our first truck broke down outside Amarillo. We had exactly $87 left to our names. I'd been crying quietly because I thought we were failing. Michael had grabbed my hand across the table and smiled. One day he told me, people are going to underestimate you, Harper. Let them. Quiet people survive storms. Loud people never see coming. Tears burned behind my eyes at the memory. God, I missed him. Tyler must have noticed my expression because his voice softened. You okay? I nodded slowly. My husband used to believe kindness mattered more than success. And you? I looked toward the dark windows. I think success without kindness becomes emptiness. A pair of headlights suddenly swept across the station parking lot outside. Then another. And another. 3 black SUVs pulled in smoothly beside the pumps. Tyler sat upright instantly. Men in dark suits stepped out first, professional, alert. One opened the rear passenger door of the middle SUV, and Olivia Bennett emerged wearing a charcoal coat over an elegant black dress, her expression colder than I had ever seen it. She spotted me through the window immediately. Then she walked inside fast enough that Tyler instinctively stood. Harper. Her eyes moved over me quickly, checking for injuries. You're freezing. I'm all right. No, Olivia said quietly, glancing toward the empty highway outside. You're really not. For the first time that night, anger finally flickered across her face. Does Ryan have any idea what he's done? I looked down at the untouched coffee in my hands. No, I whispered. He doesn't. While I sat inside a dusty gas station beside Interstate 40, my son was walking into the most important night of his career, completely unaware that his entire world was already beginning to crack beneath him. The Grand Crescent Hotel looked magnificent after dark. Crystal chandeliers glowed through towering glass windows. Luxury cars lined the circular entrance. Men in tailored tuxedos and women wrapped in diamonds drifted across the marble lobby, carrying champagne glasses and polished smiles. Silverline freight logos shimmered across giant digital banners suspended from the ballroom ceiling. 25 years. 25 years since Michael and I built the company from one dying truck and a desperate dream. And tonight, my own son had abandoned me on the side of the highway to attend the celebration. Ryan adjusted his tie nervously as he entered the ballroom beside Nicole. You look tense, Nicole whispered, with a bright social smile fixed across her face. I just want tonight to go well. It will, she replied immediately. This is your chance. Ryan nodded, though anxiety still lingered behind his eyes. He had spent years climbing the corporate ladder inside Silverline. Late nights, endless meetings, performance reviews, networking dinners. He believed tonight might finally reward all of it. What he didn't realize was that several executives already knew exactly who he really was. Not publicly, but privately, rumors had floated through upper leadership for years. The founder's son. Most assumed I had simply kept my distance out of personal preference. None of them knew how far the emotional distance had truly grown. Nicole spotted a group of executive wives near the ballroom entrance and immediately straightened her posture. There's Melissa Davenport, she whispered. And that's Rebecca Hale from corporate finance? Ryan forced a confident smile. Relax. No, you relax, Nicole muttered sharply beneath her breath. Tonight matters. They moved through the crowd, shaking hands, exchanging rehearsed laughter and polished conversation. Ryan had become good at this world. Too good. He understood stock projections, expansion strategies, leadership metrics. But somewhere along the way, he had forgotten how to recognize basic human kindness. A server passed with champagne flutes. Nicole grabbed 2 immediately. Remember, she whispered, you need to stay visible tonight. Charles Whitmore noticed his confidence. Ryan scanned the ballroom carefully. Charles Whitmore stood near the stage speaking with board members. Even at 62, Charles carried the calm authority of someone accustomed to commanding enormous rooms. He had worked beside me for nearly 2 decades. And unlike many executives, Charles had never forgotten where Silverline came from. His eyes suddenly lifted across the ballroom, straight toward Ryan, then beyond him, searching. Ryan noticed immediately. Charles approached a few moments later. "Ryan," he said warmly, shaking his hand. "Glad you made it. Wouldn't miss it." Charles nodded politely toward Nicole. "You look lovely tonight." "Thank you," Nicole answered brightly. Then Charles glanced around again. "Where's your mother?" Ryan froze almost imperceptibly. Nicole answered before he could. "Oh, Harper wasn't feeling well. The drive tired her out." Something unreadable crossed Charles's face. "I see." Ryan forced a casual shrug. She decided to rest. Charles studied him for a second too long. "That's unfortunate." Then he walked away. Nicole exhaled quietly. "That was weird." Ryan frowned. "What? Why does Charles Whitmore care whether your mother is here?" Ryan laughed awkwardly. "He's probably just being polite." But even he didn't sound convinced. Across the ballroom, massive digital screens displayed Silverline's 25-year history in rotating images. Warehouses, truck fleets, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, expansion maps. Ryan barely glanced at them at first. He had seen company presentations 100 times before. But then one particular photograph flashed briefly across the screen. A younger woman standing beside an old silver truck, dark hair blowing in the wind, holding paperwork against her chest while smiling beside a tall Hispanic man wearing a work jacket. Ryan's eyes narrowed. Something about the woman looked strangely familiar. "Wait," he muttered. Nicole followed his gaze. "What that picture?" Before he could finish, the slideshow changed again. Different images replaced it. Corporate milestones, distribution centers, board meetings. Ryan shook the thought away. Probably coincidence. Meanwhile, Nicole was already steering him toward another executive couple. "Come on," she whispered urgently. "The Dallas Regional VP is over there." As they crossed the ballroom, Ryan noticed several senior executives whispering quietly among themselves. The atmosphere felt strange, anticipatory, like everyone was waiting for something important. Near the back of the room, he overheard part of a conversation between 2 board members. "Has she arrived yet?" "Not yet. We can't start without her." Ryan frowned slightly. Without who, Nicole interrupted his thoughts immediately. "You need to stop looking distracted." "I'm not distracted." "Yes, you are." Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. "It's just..." Charles asking about Mom felt odd. Nicole scoffed softly. "Please. Your mother probably cornered him once at some holiday party years ago and talked his ear off." Ryan didn't answer. Deep down, discomfort was slowly growing inside him. Not guilt exactly, at least not yet. More like unease. Because although Ryan had convinced himself leaving me behind was temporary, a quieter voice deep inside him knew the truth. They could have waited. They could have turned around. They chose not to. Emma had barely spoken since arriving. Now she stood near the ballroom wall, staring down at her phone anxiously. Ryan approached her. "You okay? Did you call Grandma Ryan?" Hesitated. "She's fine." Emma looked up sharply. "That's not what I asked." Nicole appeared instantly beside them. "Emma enough." "No," Emma snapped quietly. "You left her there." Several nearby guests glanced toward them. Nicole lowered her voice immediately. "Do not embarrass us tonight." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "You embarrassed yourselves." Then she walked away toward the restroom before either parent could stop her. Ryan stood frozen. Nicole sighed dramatically. She's being emotional. Ryan stared toward the ballroom entrance. She's 14. Nicole grabbed his arm. Listen to me carefully. Tonight cannot become about your mother. The words settled heavily between them, because somewhere deep inside, Ryan suddenly realized something horrifying. Tonight already was about me. Near the stage, Charles Whitmore checked his watch again while speaking quietly to Olivia Bennett over the phone. His expression darkened further with every passing second. Several board members approached him nervously. Charles, should we delay the founder presentation? Charles answered immediately. Yes. For how long? Charles looked toward the ballroom doors. As long as necessary. One executive frowned. Do we have a problem? Charles's jaw tightened subtly. No, he said carefully, but I believe someone else does. Back across the ballroom, Ryan accepted another glass of champagne he barely touched. His nerves were worsening now. The giant screens suddenly shifted again. A new title appeared. The Heart of Silverline. Our Founding Story. The room slowly quieted. Music softened. Lights dimmed. Ryan turned toward the stage as old footage began playing across the massive screens. Black and white photographs. Old trucking routes. A younger Michael Rodriguez standing proudly beside the first Silverline truck. Then another image appeared. A young woman beside him holding accounting ledgers against her chest, smiling despite exhaustion. Ryan's stomach tightened instantly. Because this time, there was no mistaking her face. It was his mother. For a moment, Ryan genuinely thought he was hallucinating. The massive screen above the ballroom displayed another photograph of the young woman beside Michael Rodriguez. His mother, only younger, stronger, alive in a way he had never truly seen before. The audience watched quietly while narration filled the ballroom. Silverline Freight began with only one truck, 2 determined founders, and a dream built on sacrifice. Ryan's chest tightened. Nicole leaned closer immediately. That can't be your mother. But even she sounded uncertain now. Another image appeared. Harper standing beside warehouse workers holding blueprints. Another. Harper sitting at a folding table surrounded by invoices and maps. Another. Harper and Michael smiling together in front of the very first Silverline office. Ryan stared upward, frozen. Memories suddenly began colliding violently inside his mind. His mother leaving early every morning. Phone calls behind closed doors. Executives greeting her warmly at company events. The way Charles Whitmore always treated her with unusual respect. The way older employees sometimes stared at her with recognition. Oh, God. No, Ryan whispered under his breath. Nicole grabbed his arm hard enough to hurt. Say something. But he couldn't, because something deep inside him had already started understanding the truth. Meanwhile, 40 miles away on the highway, I sat silently in the back seat of a black SUV while city lights flickered against the windows. Olivia sat beside me reviewing documents on a tablet, though her attention kept drifting back toward me every few minutes. You don't have to do this tonight, she said softly. Yes, I do. You could expose Ryan privately. I shook my head slowly. This stopped being private the moment they left me at that gas station. The car fell quiet again. In the front passenger seat, Tyler sat stiffly, clearly still, overwhelmed by everything happening around him. Every few minutes, he glanced nervously between the suited security driver and the luxury interior surrounding him. I almost smiled despite myself. Poor boy looked like he'd accidentally wandered into somebody else's life. You don't have to come inside if you're uncomfortable, I told him gently. Tyler looked startled. No, ma'am, He rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. I've never been in a car worth more than my apartment building. Olivia almost smiled faintly at that. You helped Harper when her own family wouldn't, she said calmly. You're exactly where you belong tonight. Tyler went quiet after that. Outside the window, Oklahoma City's skyline grew larger, closer. The closer we got to the hotel, the more memories returned. Not business memories, personal ones. Michael laughing behind the wheel of our first truck. Ryan asleep across the seats during overnight deliveries when we couldn't afford babysitters. Family dinners inside tiny diners, where success still felt simple and love still felt honest. I wondered when exactly everything became so complicated. Maybe success changes people slowly enough that nobody notices until it's too late. Or maybe pain does. Olivia finally lowered her tablet. The board is furious. I'm not interested in humiliating my son. With respect, Harper, she replied carefully. Your son already humiliated himself. I looked down at my hands. I still remember teaching him how to tie his shoes. That was the problem. No matter what Ryan had become, part of me still saw the little boy who used to crawl into bed beside me after thunderstorms. Love doesn't disappear simply because disappointment arrives. Sometimes they live painfully side by side. We're here, the driver announced quietly. The Grand Crescent Hotel appeared ahead, glowing like gold against the night sky. Camera flashes sparkled near the entrance. Valets hurried between luxury vehicles. Guests in gowns and tuxedos drifted beneath towering lights. The Silver Line anniversary banner stretched across the front entrance in enormous silver letters. 25 years of family trust and legacy. I stared at the word family for a very long time. Then Olivia handed me a garment bag. I brought options, she said softly. Inside hung a beautifully tailored dark emerald gown. Elegant, classic, powerful without being flashy. I looked at it in surprise. You planned this? I've known you for 20 years, Olivia replied. I suspected you'd try arriving in that navy dress and pretending tonight didn't matter. Despite everything, I laughed quietly. The sound surprised all of us, including me. The SUV pulled into a private underground entrance beneath the hotel. Security personnel immediately approached the vehicle. Every single one greeted me respectfully. Mrs. Rodriguez. Good evening, ma'am. Welcome back. Tyler's eyes widened further with every interaction. Olivia led us toward a private executive suite connected to the ballroom level. Inside waited makeup artists, assistants, and company staff who instantly stood when I entered. The room fell completely silent. Not out of fear, out of respect. And suddenly, I remembered what dignity felt like. One assistant hurried forward nervously. Mrs. Rodriguez, we weren't sure if you were still coming tonight. For a moment, emotion caught painfully in my throat. Because strangers inside a company I built were more concerned about me than my own family had been. I'm here now, I answered gently. As stylists prepared the room, Tyler stood awkwardly near the doorway, looking completely overwhelmed. You okay? I asked softly. He laughed nervously. I think I just realized I gave free coffee to one of the richest women in Oklahoma. That coffee mattered more than you know. His expression softened. I'm sorry they treated you like that. So simple. So sincere. No manipulation, no performance, just basic human kindness. And somehow that hurt almost more than the cruelty, because kindness should never feel rare. While makeup artists worked quietly around me, Olivia briefed me on the ballroom situation. The founder presentation already started. I nodded, and Ryan Olivia hesitated carefully. He knows now. A strange ache spread through my chest. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just sadness. Because no mother dreams of watching her child realize he's failed her so completely. What about Emma? She's been asking where you are. Of course she had, sweet girl. I closed my eyes briefly. then stood slowly as the stylist zipped the emerald gown into place. When I looked into the mirror afterward, I barely recognized the woman staring back. Not because of the dress. Because for the first time in years, I looked like myself again. Not somebody shrinking herself to survive inside someone else's home. Not a burden. Not an embarrassment. Harper Rodriguez. Founder. Mother. Widow. Survivor. Olivia stepped beside me quietly. "They're ready for you." Downstairs, the ballroom presentation had just ended. Guests murmured excitedly, while Charles Whitmore stepped onto the stage holding a microphone. Ryan sat frozen near the front tables, his face pale beneath the ballroom lights. Nicole kept whispering frantically beside him. This has to be some misunderstanding. But even she no longer believed that. Charles adjusted the microphone slowly. "Tonight," he began, "we celebrate the people who built Silverline Freight through sacrifice, loyalty, and extraordinary courage." The ballroom quieted completely. Charles smiled faintly toward the entrance doors. "And now, it is my greatest honor to welcome the woman whose vision made all of this possible." Every head in the ballroom turned. The doors opened slowly, and I walked in. The ballroom fell into complete silence as I stepped through the doors. Hundreds of eyes turned toward me at once. For years, I had avoided attention whenever possible. I stayed away from public interviews, declined magazine features, let executives and spokespeople represent Silverline while I quietly remained behind the curtain. Tonight, there was nowhere left to hide. My heels echoed softly against the marble floor as I walked beside Olivia through the center aisle. I could feel the shock spreading through the room in waves. Board members stood first, then executives, then employees. Within seconds, the entire ballroom had risen to its feet. Applause thundered around me. But all I could see was my son. Ryan sat frozen beside Nicole, staring at me like he no longer recognized his own mother. And perhaps he didn't. Not really. Not anymore. Nicole's face had gone completely pale. The confidence she wore all evening had vanished, replaced by something rawer. Fear. Emma, however, looked different. Tears filled her eyes the moment she saw me. Not from shock, from relief, as if she'd been terrified something terrible had happened to me. That alone nearly broke my heart. Charles Whitmore stepped down from the stage the moment I approached. Without hesitation, he wrapped both hands gently around mine. "Welcome home, Harper." Home. Such a simple word. Yet hearing it nearly shattered the fragile composure I'd spent all evening holding together. "Thank you, Charles." He turned toward the audience, smiling warmly. "For those who may not know," he announced, "this remarkable woman beside me is Mrs. Harper Rodriguez, co-founder, majority shareholder, and the heart of Silverline Freight." A murmur swept through the ballroom instantly. Executives who already knew applauded proudly. Others stared openly in disbelief. Several younger employees immediately pulled out phones, whispering to one another. Ryan looked physically ill now. Nicole slowly turned toward him. "You knew," she whispered urgently. Ryan's voice barely worked. "No." One word. But inside that one word lived shame, confusion, panic, and disbelief all tangled together. Charles continued speaking. 25 years ago, Harper Rodriguez and her late husband Michael built this company from a single truck and a dream. The giant screens behind us lit up again with old photographs. Michael unloading freight in the rain. Me balancing invoices at a folding table. Ryan as a little boy sitting inside our first truck, smiling proudly beside his father. My chest tightened painfully at that image. Because once upon a time we had been happy. Not rich, not powerful, but happy. Charles gestured toward the audience. Many people know the success story of Silverline Freight, he said. What they don't know is the extraordinary sacrifice behind it. Another photograph appeared, me standing beside hospital equipment after Michael's death. Then another. A younger version of me attending meetings surrounded by older businessmen who looked less than welcoming. Then another. Warehouse expansions, contract signings, long nights, hard years, survival. I glanced toward Ryan again. He couldn't stop staring at the screen, at me, at the life he never knew his mother had lived. Nicole leaned toward him frantically. Why wouldn't you tell me this? Ryan didn't answer, because the truth was devastatingly simple. He never asked. Charles lowered the microphone slightly. After Michael Rodriguez passed away, Harper carried this company through its hardest years while raising her son alone. The room applauded again. But Ryan looked like each clap physically hurt him. And perhaps it did. Because applause has a cruel way of exposing silence, especially the silence of neglect. Emma suddenly stood from her chair and rushed toward me before anyone could stop her. Grandma! Her voice cracked as she threw her arms around me. I held her tightly. For one brief moment, everything else disappeared. The ballroom, the executives, the humiliation. All of it faded beneath the simple comfort of one person still loving me without conditions. I was so worried, Emma whispered through tears. I'm all right, sweetheart. Behind us, cameras flashed rapidly. Nicole looked horrified. Not because Emma hugged me, because people were watching. Always appearances, always image. Ryan slowly stood from his seat at last. The room subtly shifted around him as whispers spread. Now they knew. The executive who abandoned his elderly mother at a gas station had unknowingly abandoned the founder of the company itself. Tyler stood quietly near the back of the ballroom beside Olivia's security team, looking completely overwhelmed. When our eyes met briefly, he gave me a small, encouraging nod. Kindness again. Simple kindness. I wondered bitterly why strangers seemed capable of it so much more easily than family. Charles leaned toward me carefully. You don't have to continue tonight if you don't wish to. I looked around the ballroom slowly, then toward Ryan. He looked terrified now. Not of me, of consequences. And suddenly I understood something heartbreaking. For years I believed hiding my identity protected my son from becoming spoiled. Instead, it had only revealed who he truly was when he thought I had nothing left to offer him. Money doesn't create character. It exposes it. Charles handed me the microphone gently. The ballroom became completely silent. I stood there for several long seconds, gathering myself before finally speaking. When Michael and I started Silverline Freight, I began softly. We didn't dream about wealth. The room listened carefully. We dreamed about stability, about family, about building something strong enough that our son would never experience the struggles we did. Ryan lowered his eyes immediately. I continued carefully. For many years, I believed success meant sacrifice. Longer hours, less sleep, more pressure. A faint, sad smile touched my lips, and perhaps that was true. I paused briefly. But somewhere along the way, I learned something far more important. The ballroom remained utterly silent. No amount of success matters if the people you love begin treating kindness like weakness. Ryan's face drained of color completely. Nicole looked ready to disappear. Still, I never raised my voice. Never attacked them directly. Because dignity is far more powerful than rage. I spent most of my life hiding who I was, I continued. Not because I was ashamed, but because I wanted the people around me to love me for my heart, not my position. Tears burned behind my eyes now. And tonight, I realized something painful. I looked directly at Ryan. When people believe you have nothing left to give them, that's when you discover how they truly see you. The silence afterward felt unbearable. Several guests looked visibly emotional now. Even hardened executives shifted uncomfortably, because everyone in that ballroom understood exactly what I wasn't saying aloud. Ryan finally stepped forward weakly. "Mom," his voice cracked badly. I saw genuine panic in his eyes for the first time all night. Not career panic, personal panic. The kind that comes when someone suddenly realizes the damage they've done may never fully heal. But before he could say another word, Charles quietly stepped beside me once more. "There's something else everyone should know," he announced calmly. The room turned toward him again. Charles looked directly at Ryan. "Mrs. Rodriguez still holds controlling ownership of Silverline Freight." Gasps spread instantly through the ballroom. Ryan stared at Charles in disbelief. Nicole physically staggered backward into her chair. And suddenly, every single thing they thought they understood about power status and control shattered right in front of them. "Ket tuts fantam, tiep tuts yeuko, viet ju mot nghin jen mot nghin, hetram tu theoquijin viet bang tieng an, pan chin." The silence after Charles's announcement felt almost unnatural, like the entire ballroom had forgotten how to breathe. "Mrs. Rodriguez still holds controlling ownership of Silverline Freight." The words echoed through the room long after Charles stepped away from the microphone. I could see the shock spreading across every face in the audience. Executives whispered quietly to one another. Investors exchanged stunned looks. Employees stared openly at me with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. But none of them looked as shattered as my son. Ryan stood motionless several feet away from me, his face drained completely of color. For the first time in his life, he looked small. Not physically, emotionally. Like the foundation beneath everything he believed about himself had suddenly collapsed. Nicole recovered first. People like Nicole always do. Because survival mattered more to her than shame ever would. She forced a nervous laugh and stepped toward me quickly, her voice overly bright. "Harper, wow, this is such an incredible surprise." Surprise. I looked at her quietly. This woman had made me sleep beside storage boxes for 3 years. She complained about my cooking, criticized my clothes, rolled her eyes whenever I entered a room. And now suddenly her tone dripped with sweetness, so artificial it almost embarrassed me for her. "You should have told us," she continued quickly. "We had no idea." No idea. The phrase settled heavily in my chest. Because she was right. They truly had no idea. Not about the company, not about my sacrifices, not about the woman I used to be before life and grief and motherhood slowly taught me to disappear quietly inside my own family. Ryan finally found his voice. "Mom." His eyes filled with something I had waited years to see. Regret. Real regret. But regret arriving too late has a tragic kind of emptiness to it. I turned toward him slowly. "Yes," he swallowed hard. I don't understand." A sad smile touched my lips. "That's the problem, Ryan." The ballroom remained completely silent around us. Nobody dared interrupt. Even the servers had stopped moving. Ryan shook his head weakly. "Why wouldn't you tell me?" I stared at him for several seconds before answering. "Because I wanted a son who respected people before he respected power." That hit him harder than shouting ever could have. Nicole immediately stepped in again. "This is all just a misunderstanding," she said quickly. "We never meant to leave you there." Emma, who still stood beside me, suddenly spoke up. "Yes, you did." Nicole froze. "Emma." No, Emma interrupted, tears burning in her eyes now. You told Dad to keep driving. The room shifted instantly. Whispers spread louder this time. Nicole's face tightened. That's not what happened. Emma looked directly at her mother. You said Grandma was ruining the night. Nicole opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Because sometimes children tell the truth more cleanly than adults ever can. Ryan looked horrified now. Emma, you left her alone? Emma whispered. What if something happened to her? That question pierced deeper than anyone realized. Because something had happened to me. Not physically, emotionally. Something inside me had finally broken at that gas station. Tyler stood quietly near the back wall, watching everything unfold. I could see discomfort written across his face. Poor boy looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. But before the moment could spiral further, Charles gently motioned toward the stage again. Harper, he said softly. Perhaps everyone deserves to hear the full story. I hesitated, not because I feared embarrassment, because telling the truth aloud makes pain feel more permanent somehow. Still, I walked slowly toward the stage. The microphone felt strangely heavy in my hands. I looked across the ballroom filled with wealth power and polished appearances. Then I began. When my husband and I built Silverline, I said quietly, we believed success would protect our family. The room listened carefully. We believed hard work would create security, stability, love. I paused briefly. But success can also create distance if people begin measuring human worth by status instead of character. Nicole lowered her eyes immediately. Ryan looked like he wanted the floor to open beneath him. I continued carefully. Tonight, my family stopped at a gas station on the way here. A ripple moved through the audience. I went inside to buy aspirin. My voice remained calm, controlled. But inside, every memory still hurt. When I came back out, they were gone. No dramatic music, no screaming, just truth. And somehow truth sounded far crueler than anger. Several people in the audience visibly recoiled. One older woman near the front covered her mouth with her hand. I glanced toward Tyler. He looked startled when I gestured gently toward him. This young man helped me tonight when I had nowhere else to go. All eyes turned toward Tyler instantly. Poor thing nearly looked ready to faint. I smiled softly at him. Would you come up here for a moment? Tyler hesitated before slowly approaching the stage. He looked painfully underdressed among tuxedos and evening gowns, but somehow more dignified than many people in the room. What's your name? Charles asked kindly. Tyler Brooks, sir. Charles shook his hand warmly. Thank you for helping Mrs. Rodriguez. Tyler glanced nervously toward me. I didn't really do much. Yes, I said softly. You did. The ballroom stayed completely silent. Tyler swallowed hard before speaking carefully. She looked cold and scared, he admitted. I thought maybe her family got lost or something. His eyes flickered briefly toward Ryan. But then I realized they weren't coming back. The shame on Ryan's face became unbearable to watch. Even now, part of me wanted to protect him from it. That's what motherhood does. It keeps loving, even while bleeding. Tyler continued quietly. She kept defending them. That sentence nearly destroyed me. Because it was true. Even abandoned beside a highway, I still tried protecting the people who hurt me. I looked down briefly before taking the microphone again. My husband used to say character reveals itself when nobody powerful is watching. I let the words settle. Tonight, a young man working the night shift at a gas station showed me more compassion than my own family. Nicole suddenly stood. This is becoming unfair. Several heads turned sharply toward her. She forced a tight smile. "We made a mistake. That's all?" "A mistake," Emma whispered in disbelief. Nicole's composure cracked slightly. "Yes, Emma, a mistake." Ryan closed his eyes briefly. But I simply looked at Nicole calmly. "No," I said softly. "It wasn't a mistake." The room froze again, because deep down, everybody already understood the difference. A mistake happens once you realize someone is missing. My family realized, and kept driving. Ryan suddenly stepped forward again, desperation breaking through his voice now. "Mom, please." I turned toward him slowly. For a moment, I saw flashes of the little boy he used to be. The child who once held my hand crossing parking lots. The teenager who cried after Michael died. The young man who used to hug me before ambition hardened him into someone I barely recognized. And that made this so much worse, because monsters are easier to hate than sons. "I never wanted any of this," he whispered. I believed him. That was the tragedy. Ryan never consciously planned to become cruel. He simply allowed selfishness to grow unchecked until empathy disappeared beneath it. And now, the consequences stood fully exposed beneath ballroom lights for everyone to see. The ballroom no longer felt like a celebration. It felt like judgment, not the loud kind filled with screaming and humiliation. The quieter kind. The kind where truth sits heavily in the center of the room, forcing everyone to examine themselves, whether they want to or not. Ryan stood only a few feet away from me now, but emotionally he had never felt farther. His face looked pale beneath the chandelier lights. His hands trembled slightly at his sides. Every confident piece of him had collapsed since learning the truth. And for the first time in years, I saw my son without the armor of ambition, just a frightened man confronting the consequences of his own choices. "Mom," he whispered again. I looked at him calmly. "Yes, I swear I never thought." "That's exactly the problem," Ryan, I interrupted softly. "You stopped thinking about me a long time ago." The words landed harder than anger, because they were true. Ryan opened his mouth to defend himself, but no explanation came. What excuse could possibly exist that he was busy, distracted, embarrassed by his aging mother? None of it changed the image burned permanently into my memory. The empty parking space, the disappearing taillights, the message telling me to stay there. Nicole suddenly stepped forward beside him. "Harper, please," she said carefully. "We can talk about this privately." Privately. Interesting how people only want privacy once their behavior becomes public. I studied her quietly. Nicole's makeup remained flawless. Her diamond earrings still sparkled beneath the lights. From a distance, she looked perfectly composed, but her eyes betrayed panic. Not sorrow, not guilt. Fear. Fear of losing status. Fear of losing proximity to power. Fear that everyone in this ballroom now saw exactly who she truly was. "You spent years treating me like an inconvenience," I said calmly. Nicole's expression tightened immediately. "That's not fair." "No," I asked gently. A painful silence followed. Because fairness was never truly the issue. Truth was. Emma stepped closer to me, wiping tears from her face. "Grandma shouldn't have to stand here defending herself," she said shakily. Ryan turned toward his daughter in disbelief. "Emma? No, Dad!" She snapped, emotion finally exploding out of her. "You left her there." The room shifted again. Every whisper, every glance, every uncomfortable stare aimed directly at my son now. Ryan looked like he could barely breathe. And suddenly, I hated this. Not because the truth came out, Because watching your child collapse under shame hurts even when they deserve it. That's the terrible thing about being a mother. Your heart refuses to separate punishment from pain. Charles Whitmore stepped toward the stage microphone once more, sensing the room spiraling emotionally. I think tonight should remind all of us, he said carefully, that success means very little without integrity. Several people nodded quietly. Charles looked toward me warmly. Harper spent decades building this company with extraordinary sacrifice. Most people here know the business story. He paused briefly. What they may not know is that she personally funded employee hardship programs after the recession. She paid medical expenses for drivers' families after accidents. She created scholarship programs quietly without putting her name on them. More murmurs spread through the ballroom. Ryan looked stunned all over again, because he truly had no idea who his mother was, not just professionally, personally. The tragedy wasn't simply that he didn't know I owned the company. He didn't know my heart anymore either. Charles continued. Silverline survived because Harper Rodriguez never abandoned people during difficult times. That sentence hit the ballroom with devastating force. Ryan lowered his eyes immediately. Nicole looked away entirely. Tyler stood near the back wall, watching silently, his expression full of quiet sadness. He understood. Everyone understood now. I looked around the ballroom slowly before speaking again. I didn't come here tonight to destroy my son. Ryan's head lifted instantly. I came because hiding the truth any longer would destroy me. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. For years I convinced myself that being needed was enough, that if I stayed quiet, stayed small, eventually my family would remember my value. I glanced toward Ryan. But love cannot survive where respect disappears. The silence afterward felt almost sacred. Even the music had stopped completely now. Only my voice filled the ballroom. I gave my son everything I had, I continued quietly. Not because I expected repayment, but because that's what mothers do. Memories flashed painfully through my mind. Ryan's first bicycle. School lunches packed before dawn. Working 18-hour days after Michael died. Selling my wedding jewelry during Silverline's hardest year to make payroll. Every sacrifice suddenly felt unbearably heavy. I would have slept in that little storage room forever, I admitted softly, if I still felt wanted. Nicole's eyes widened slightly at that, because deep down, she knew exactly what room I meant. The tiny converted space beside the laundry machines. The room with no windows. The room she called cozy. Ryan looked horrified. Mom! His voice cracked badly now. Real tears filled his eyes for the first time all night. I didn't know you felt that way. I almost laughed. Not cruelly. Just sadly. How could you not know, I whispered. That question destroyed him more completely than anything else, because the answer was obvious. He stopped paying attention. Not all cruelty begins with hatred. Sometimes it begins with indifference. Emma quietly reached for my hand again, and in that simple gesture, I felt more genuine love than I had received inside that house for years. Charles stepped beside me once more. There's one final matter that should be addressed tonight. The room straightened subtly again. Business, consequences, reality returning. Charles glanced briefly toward the board members seated near the front. Mrs. Rodriguez still maintains final executive authority regarding senior leadership appointments within Silverline Freight. Ryan visibly stiffened. He knew exactly what that meant. The promotion, the executive position. Everything he had worked toward all evening now hung by a thread controlled by the very woman he abandoned. Nicole looked physically sick now. I could almost hear her thoughts racing. The lost prestige, the ruined image, the gossip that would spread through corporate circles by morning. Ryan stepped toward me carefully. "I don't care about the promotion," he said quickly. And for the first time all night, I believed he meant it. Because finally, something worse than professional failure terrified him. Losing me. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. The ballroom remained completely still, waiting for my response. And honestly, part of me wanted to forgive him immediately. That's the dangerous thing about mothers. We remember who our children used to be, even while staring directly at who they became. But forgiveness without accountability isn't love, it's surrender. So I looked at my son carefully before answering. "You abandoned me on the side of a highway, Ryan." His face crumpled completely. "I know." "No," I said softly. "You know now." The difference mattered. Because regret after exposure is easy. Character before exposure is what truly defines a person. Ryan covered his face briefly with one trembling hand. And for the first time since Michael died all those years ago, my son looked like a lost little boy again. Only this time, I couldn't protect him from the consequences waiting ahead. The ballroom slowly began breathing again after my last words. Not normally. Carefully. Like everyone present understood they had just witnessed something deeply personal that no amount of money or corporate polish could hide. Ryan still stood frozen in front of me, his eyes, red shoulders, tense, face hollowed by shame. Nicole had gone completely silent now. For the first time since I met her, she had no clever comment left. No polished excuse. No performance. Just fear sitting plainly behind her expensive makeup. Charles Whitmore stepped closer to the microphone again, but his tone softened considerably this time. "I think tonight reminds us all," he said carefully, "that companies are not built by profit alone." The ballroom remained quiet. "They are built by people, by sacrifice, by loyalty." He looked toward me warmly, and Harper Rodriguez gave this company all three. A wave of applause rose again across the ballroom. This time slower, more emotional. Several older employees stood with tears in their eyes. One former driver near the back removed his hat respectfully against his chest. I recognized him instantly. Frank Delaney. He had worked our Texas routes nearly 20 years earlier, back when Silverline still struggled to survive winter fuel costs. Our eyes met briefly, and he nodded toward me with quiet gratitude. Moments like that mattered more to me than all the applause in the room, because those people remembered who I had been before success. Ryan noticed the exchange too, and I think that was the moment he truly understood the size of the life I had hidden from him. Not just wealth, legacy, respect, meaning. Things money alone can never buy. Olivia stepped beside Charles, holding several documents in a slim black folder. Professional calm had returned to her face, though I could still sense anger beneath it. "Harper," she said gently, "the board would like clarification regarding tonight's incident." Ryan immediately looked panicked again. "Please," he said quickly, turning toward me, "don't do this publicly." I stared at him quietly. "You already made it public when you drove away." His eyes closed briefly in pain, and still, part of me hurt for him. That's what nobody tells you about motherhood. Even when your child breaks your heart, your instincts still reach toward them instead of away. Olivia opened the folder calmly. "Security reviewed highway camera footage after we received your call." Nicole visibly stiffened. "There's clear evidence the vehicle paused approximately 2 miles from the gas station before continuing toward Oklahoma City." The room shifted again, meaning Ryan and Nicole realized I was missing and kept driving anyway. Emma began crying softly beside me. Ryan looked destroyed. Nicole immediately spoke up again, desperation finally replacing composure. We were overwhelmed. The gala was starting. Ryan was stressed. And your solution? Olivia interrupted coldly, was abandoning a 67-year-old woman without her purse, medication, or transportation. Nicole looked stunned at being challenged publicly. People like her rarely expect consequences, especially social ones. Ryan turned sharply toward his wife. Stop talking. Nicole stared at him in disbelief. You're blaming me now? Ryan ran a shaking hand across his face. You told me to keep driving. You agreed. The argument exploded suddenly and painfully. Years of buried resentment surfacing all at once beneath crystal chandeliers and executive eyes. I said we'd send someone back later, Nicole hissed. You said she was ruining the night, she was making things awkward? Emma suddenly shouted through tears. She's your mother. The ballroom froze again. Not because Emma yelled, because every word she spoke carried painful truth adults kept trying to avoid. Ryan looked toward his daughter helplessly. Emma? But Emma backed away from both parents. No, she whispered. Grandma loved us. She did everything for us. Then she looked directly at Nicole. And you treated her like trash. Nicole's face crumpled slightly. Not from guilt, from humiliation. Because children have a brutal way of exposing moral failure without softening it. I finally stepped forward gently. That's enough. The room quieted instantly. I turned toward Emma first. Sweetheart, come here. She moved toward me immediately, and I wrapped my arms around her trembling shoulders. It's all right. No, it's not, she whispered. I kissed the top of her head softly. I know. Ryan watched the moment with tears openly falling now. And suddenly, for the first time all evening, I saw genuine self-awareness beginning to form inside him. Not fear of losing his promotion. Not fear of embarrassment. Fear that he had become someone unrecognizable to the people who loved him. Charles cleared his throat gently. There is still the matter of Ryan's pending executive promotion. The room straightened again. Business returning. Consequences becoming official. Ryan immediately shook his head. I don't want it. Nicole turned toward him in shock. What I said, I don't want it. His voice cracked badly. Not like this. Nicole stared at him like she no longer understood who he was. Maybe she didn't. Because sometimes public shame strips ambition away long enough for humanity to finally surface. Charles looked toward me carefully. As controlling shareholder, the decision remains yours. Harper. Hundreds of eyes turned toward me again. Waiting. Watching. Some expecting revenge. Others hoping for mercy. And honestly, I didn't know what I wanted anymore. Part of me wanted to punish Ryan harshly. Another part remembered a little boy falling asleep against my shoulder during long truck rides. Love and pain battled constantly inside a mother's heart. Finally, I spoke quietly. Ryan will not receive the executive promotion. Nicole inhaled sharply. Ryan lowered his eyes, immediately accepting it before I even finished speaking. But I continued. However, the ballroom stilled again. I will not destroy my son's career because of one terrible night. Ryan looked up slowly. Shock spread across Nicole's face. But there will be consequences, I said firmly. I stepped closer toward Ryan. You forgot something very important somewhere along the way. Tears streamed openly down his face now. You forgot that leadership begins with character. No one moved. No one spoke. You can learn business strategy, I continued softly. You can learn management skills. But if success makes you cruel to vulnerable people, then you are not ready to lead anyone. Ryan nodded weakly. I know. I held his gaze. No, I whispered sadly. You're only beginning to know. That truth hurt both of us, because growth begins the moment denial finally dies. Olivia quietly closed the folder in her hands. The board members exchanged relieved looks. The disaster hadn't become total destruction. But neither had it been ignored. Charles finally stepped beside me again. I think tonight, he said gently, became about something much larger than business. He was right. This was never truly about money, or ownership, or corporate titles. It was about dignity, about how easily families stop seeing the people who sacrificed everything for them, about how aging parents slowly become invisible inside their own homes. I looked around the ballroom one final time before speaking again. Many elderly people are abandoned emotionally long before they are abandoned physically. The silence turned heavy. Sometimes it happens quietly. A disrespectful comment, a closed door, a forgotten invitation. A storage room turned into a bedroom. Nicole visibly flinched. Tonight just made that pain impossible to hide anymore. Several guests looked emotional now, some uncomfortable, some ashamed. Because deep down, many of them probably recognized pieces of themselves in this story. And perhaps that was the saddest part of all. Ket thuk fan moi mo. Tiep tuk yo, kau viet ju motn hin jen, motn hin hai trum, tu theo qui jin viet bang tieng an, fan moi hai. The gala ended quietly after that. No music, no dancing, no celebration. People left the ballroom in hushed conversations, carrying expensive coats and uncomfortable thoughts out into the cold Oklahoma night. Some executives approached me before leaving. A few offered sympathy. Others apologized for not realizing how isolated my life had become. One elderly woman held my hands with tears in her eyes and whispered, "Thank you for saying what so many mothers never get to say out loud." That stayed with me, because she was right. There are countless women who spend entire lifetimes giving everything to their families, only to slowly disappear inside them. Tonight, people finally saw it happen in real time. Ryan barely moved during most of the evening's aftermath. He remained seated near the stage long after the crowd thinned, staring blankly at the empty champagne glasses scattered across nearby tables. Nicole paced furiously near the ballroom exit, making whispered phone calls. Damage control. That's what people like Nicole always do first. Not reflection, not remorse. Control. Emma refused to stand near either parent. Instead, she stayed quietly beside me and Tyler, while Olivia coordinated security and transportation. At one point, Tyler leaned toward me awkwardly. "I should probably head home," he said softly. "I didn't mean to become part of all this." I smiled gently. "You didn't become part of a scandal tonight, Tyler." He looked uncertain. "You became part of a moment that mattered." His expression softened slightly. Still, I could see exhaustion in his face. The poor boy had worked a long shift, only to end up standing inside a luxury ballroom watching a wealthy family destroy itself emotionally. Not exactly a normal Friday night. Olivia approached, holding a small business card. "Harper would like Silverline to cover your college tuition if you're interested." Tyler blinked in shock. "What you mentioned, wanting to return to school?" Olivia continued calmly. "Your file showed you deferred community college after your father became ill." Tyler looked completely speechless. "You checked my file?" Olivia almost smiled faintly. "You helped the most important person in this company tonight. Of course we checked." His eyes immediately filled with tears he clearly tried to hide. "I can't accept something like that." "Yes," I said softly. "You can." He looked at me helplessly. "Why?" "Because kindness should be rewarded." Because compassion matters. Because somewhere along the way, society forgot how important decent human beings truly are. But instead of saying all that, I simply answered honestly. Because you treated me like a person when others didn't. Tyler looked away quickly after that, overwhelmed. Meanwhile, across the ballroom, Nicole finally marched toward Ryan with fury radiating from every step. "This is a disaster," she hissed under her breath. Ryan barely reacted. Nicole stared at him in disbelief. "Are you even listening to me?" Slowly, Ryan looked up. For the first time in years, he looked completely stripped of ego. "What exactly are you upset about, Nicole?" Her eyes widened. "What am I upset about?" she repeated sharply. "Your promotion is gone. People are staring at us like we're monsters. Social media is probably exploding already." Ryan flinched slightly at the word monsters. Nicole kept going. "We need to fix this immediately. Fix this." As though abandoning someone's mother beside a highway was a public relations inconvenience instead of a moral failure. Ryan rubbed both hands over his face tiredly. "You still don't understand." Nicole crossed her arms. "No, you don't understand. Your mother humiliated us tonight." That sentence finally broke something inside him. Ryan stood abruptly. "My mother!" he snapped. Several nearby employees turned immediately. Ryan lowered his voice, but anger remained. "She spent decades building this company while we treated her like she was disposable." Nicole scoffed. "Oh, please don't suddenly act righteous. You were right there beside me." That hit him hard because it was true. Ryan stared at the floor silently. Nicole's expression softened slightly when she realized she'd gone too far. "Ryan." But he interrupted quietly. "I left my mother alone on the side of a highway." The pain in his voice startled even me, because finally, truly, the reality had begun settling inside him. Not the loss of the promotion, the loss of himself. Emma approached slowly then. Ryan looked at his daughter hopefully, but Emma stopped several feet away. "I don't recognize you anymore," she whispered. Those 6 words devastated him more completely than anything else that night. Because children see honesty, adults avoid. Ryan's face crumpled. "Emma, sweetheart." "No," she interrupted softly, tears returning. "Grandma loved us even when we treated her badly." Nicole stepped forward immediately. "That's enough disrespect." Emma turned toward her mother. "You care more about appearances than people." Nicole looked slapped. "I am your mother, and Grandma is yours now too." Emma shot back toward Ryan. Silence. Painful silence. Ryan couldn't answer, because his daughter was right. I finally walked toward them slowly. "Emma," I said gently. "That's enough." She looked at me emotionally. "But Grandma, I know." I reached out and touched her cheek softly. Anger can become poison if we hold it too long. The irony of those words wasn't lost on me. I had spent years swallowing hurt quietly until it nearly hollowed me out from the inside. Ryan looked at me carefully then, almost fearfully. "Why are you still being kind to us?" That question nearly broke my heart, because somewhere along the way, my son had started believing kindness only existed when earned. I answered softly. "Because cruelty should stop somewhere." Tears filled his eyes again instantly. Nicole looked away. For the first time all evening, I thought I saw shame flicker briefly across her face too. Not enough, but maybe the beginning of it. Olivia approached once more, carrying several folders. The board scheduled an emergency executive review for Monday morning. Ryan nodded numbly. "I understand. You're being removed from interim promotion consideration effective immediately." Nicole inhaled sharply again, but Ryan simply accepted it. No argument, no negotiation, perhaps because punishment feels strangely fair once denial finally dies. Olivia continued. However, Mrs. Rodriguez requested that your current employment remain intact pending further evaluation. Ryan stared at me in shock. You did? I nodded once. You made a terrible decision, Ryan. But one terrible decision should not define an entire life. His lips trembled slightly. I don't deserve that. No, I said honestly. You don't. The truth landed heavily between us. Mercy means more when everyone involved understands it isn't owed. Nicole finally spoke again, though much quieter now. What happens now? I looked around the nearly empty ballroom. Workers were clearing glasses. Lights dimmed slowly overhead. The celebration had ended hours earlier emotionally, even if the clock hadn't caught up yet. Now, I said softly, everyone lives with the truth. Ryan lowered his head again. Emma quietly slipped her hand into mine. And for the first time all night, exhaustion finally settled fully into my bones. Not physical exhaustion, emotional exhaustion. The kind that comes after years of silence finally break open all at once. I looked toward the ballroom doors where cold night air waited outside, then back toward my son. And deep down, I realized something difficult. Tonight exposed who Ryan had become. But it also revealed something else. For the first time in years, he was finally beginning to see it too. 3 days after the gala, Ryan came to see me alone. No Nicole, no excuses prepared in advance, no polished image to protect. Just my son standing outside the front gate of my Oklahoma home, looking like he hadn't slept properly since the night he left me at that gas station. Olivia had insisted I stay at the estate temporarily after the gala. I hated calling it an estate. The house never felt like wealth to me. It felt like history. Michael had designed most of it himself years ago after Silverline finally became profitable. Wide front porch, large oak trees, quiet lake behind the property, a peaceful place we once dreamed our family would fill with holidays and laughter. Instead, most rooms had remained empty for years. I saw Ryan standing at the gate through the kitchen window while making tea. For several long seconds, I considered telling staff to send him away. Not out of anger, out of exhaustion. Because forgiveness is emotionally expensive when the wound is still fresh. But then, I saw something in the way he stood. Not pride, not entitlement. Shame. Real shame. And unfortunately for mothers, everywhere seeing your child broken still activates every protective instinct inside you. I opened the front door slowly. Ryan immediately stood straighter. Mom. His voice sounded rough and hollow. I stepped aside quietly. Come in. He entered carefully like someone afraid he no longer belonged there. Maybe he was right. The kitchen remained exactly the way Michael designed it decades earlier. Warm lighting, wooden cabinets, the smell of cinnamon from the bread I'd baked that morning. Ryan looked around slowly. I haven't been here in years. You stopped visiting after Nicole said the drive was inconvenient? The truth landed awkwardly between us. Ryan lowered his eyes immediately. I remember helping Dad paint this kitchen. I nodded softly. You were 10. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt painfully crowded with memories. I poured tea into 2 cups and motioned toward the table. Ryan sat carefully across from me, and suddenly, all I could see was the little boy who used to swing his legs beneath this same table while eating cereal before school. How does that child become a man capable of leaving his mother behind? That question had haunted me every night since the gala. Ryan stared down at his untouched tea. I don't know how to start fixing this. Honesty. At least we finally had honesty. You start by telling the truth? I answered quietly. He nodded slowly. Then after several painful seconds, he whispered the words, I think he'd been avoiding his entire life. I became selfish. Hearing your child admit something ugly about themselves hurts strangely deeply. Not because you disagree, because you know it's true. Ryan rubbed both hands together nervously. At first, I thought I was just working hard, building a future, trying to be successful. His eyes filled slowly, but somewhere along the way, I started caring more about impressing people than loving them. I listened silently. Nicole always talked about status, he continued. Promotions, image, connections. And I kept telling myself that once I reached the next level, everything would settle down. He laughed bitterly. But there's always another level. Yes, I knew that lesson well. Success can become an endless hunger if you let it define your worth. Ryan looked up at me carefully. When Dad died, did you really run the company alone? I smiled faintly. Not alone. There were good people around me. But you carried it. Yes. His face twisted painfully. And I never knew. No, I said softly. You never asked. That sentence hit him hard again. Because deep down, Ryan understood the deeper meaning now. Children stop asking questions when they stop truly seeing their parents as full human beings. He swallowed hard. Why did you hide it from me? I leaned back, slowly staring toward the lake outside the kitchen windows. Because I grew up poor? I said quietly. And I watched money destroy people. Ryan remained silent. I didn't want you growing up entitled. I wanted you to become kind before powerful. A sad smile touched my lips briefly. I thought I was protecting you. Tears slipped down Ryan's face. Instead of wiping them away immediately, he let them fall. Maybe because he finally understood he deserved to feel this pain. I failed you. The words came out barely above a whisper. And somehow hearing him say that hurt more than all the insults. Because mothers don't want apologies from their children. We want them to become good people. I failed your father too, Ryan added. At that, something inside me cracked. Michael would have hated what our family became. Not because of the money, because of the coldness, the arrogance, the emotional neglect. Ryan suddenly looked around the kitchen again, eyes distant with memory. I remember one winter when our heat stopped working, he said quietly. I smiled sadly. You were 7. You and Dad slept in coats for 3 nights because you only had enough money to buy one space heater. I looked at him in surprise. You remember that? I remember everything now. His voice broke completely. I remember Dad teaching me to respect people no matter what job they had. Tears burned behind my own eyes now. I remember you skipping dinner and pretending you weren't hungry. I looked away quickly. Ryan covered his face briefly with trembling hands. And I still left you at a gas station. There it was again. The truth neither of us could escape. No amount of explanation erased that moment. No apology could undo it. Ryan finally looked up again. When did you become someone I was ashamed of? The question stunned him, because he realized immediately it wasn't accusation. It was heartbreak. I don't know, he whispered. I studied my son carefully. The dark circles under his eyes, the exhaustion in his posture. The collapse of ego finally revealing the frightened little boy underneath. You know what hurt most? I asked softly. Ryan shook his head slowly. It wasn't Nicole. He looked confused. I expected very little from Nicole by the end. The honesty of that seemed to wound him further. It was you staying silent while she slowly erased me from my own family. Ryan's tears returned immediately. She'd criticize me, and you'd look away. She'd insult me, and you'd change the subject. I paused carefully. Every time you stayed silent, you taught her it was acceptable. Ryan looked completely shattered now, because silence becomes cruelty eventually, and he finally understood that. I'm sorry, he whispered again, helplessly. I know, but I don't know how to fix this. I stared at him quietly for a long moment, then finally answered honestly. You may never fully fix it. The truth hurt both of us, because trust once broken deeply enough never returns exactly the same. But I continued softly. That doesn't mean you stop trying. Ryan cried openly then, not dramatically, quietly, the way grown men cry when pride finally dies. And for the first time in many years, I reached across the table and held my son's hand. Not because everything was healed, not because forgiveness erased consequences, but because somewhere beneath all the damage, he was finally becoming human again. Unknown to both of us, Emma stood quietly in the hallway just beyond the kitchen doorway, listening, crying silently too. And perhaps for the first time since our family started falling apart, hope finally entered the room with her. The weeks after the gala changed everything. Not suddenly, not magically. Real healing never happens that way. It happens slowly, painfully, one honest moment at a time. Ryan returned to work at Silverline the following Monday under conditions set directly by the board and approved by me personally. His executive promotion was permanently revoked. Instead, he was reassigned to a mid-level operations role at one of our older regional distribution centers outside Tulsa. No private office, no executive privileges, no leadership team. Just work. Real work. The kind Michael and I used to do ourselves. When Olivia informed him of the decision, Ryan accepted it without argument. That mattered to me more than he realized. Pride had finally started loosening its grip on him. Nicole, however, reacted exactly the opposite way. This is humiliation, she snapped the moment Ryan told her. They stood in the kitchen of the same house where I once quietly folded laundry while pretending not to hear their insults. Only now, the silence inside those walls belonged to them. Ryan looked exhausted. It's fair. Nicole stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Fair your mother destroyed your future. No, Ryan answered quietly. I did. That sentence changed something between them permanently, because for years Nicole's power over Ryan depended on one thing: his willingness to blame everyone except himself. Now that was gone. Nicole paced furiously across the kitchen. You're just going to let her punish us. Ryan finally looked directly at his wife. Do you even hear yourself anymore? Nicole froze slightly. She abandoned me too, Ryan continued bitterly. The second things became difficult, all you cared about was status. That's not true. Then why was your first concern the promotion? Nicole opened her mouth, closed it again, because deep down she knew the answer. Ryan rubbed his face tiredly. I left my mother alone on the side of a highway. Nicole's expression hardened defensively. And you're going to repeat that forever? No, Ryan whispered. I'm going to remember it forever. Those words ended something between them that had been breaking for years already. Not because of the gala, because crisis exposes what love is truly built on. And their marriage had slowly become built on image instead of compassion. 2 weeks later, Nicole moved out. No screaming, no dramatic fight, just quiet bitterness and packed suitcases. Emma watched silently from the staircase while her mother carried designer luggage through the front door. Nicole paused before leaving. "You're really choosing your grandmother over me." Emma's voice remained calm. "I'm choosing the person who never made love feel conditional." Nicole looked stunned, then hurt, then angry again. But she left without another word. Afterward, Emma stood in the doorway crying quietly while watching her mother drive away. Ryan approached carefully. "Emma?" She wiped her face quickly. "I love Mom," she whispered. "I know," but she made Grandma feel invisible. Ryan lowered his eyes. "So did I. That honesty mattered. It didn't erase the damage. But honesty is where healing begins." A few days later, Emma asked if she could stay with me temporarily. "Only if your father agrees," I told her gently. Ryan surprised both of us. "I think it might be good for her," he admitted quietly. The truth was simpler than that. He knew Emma needed warmth, while their home still carried the emotional wreckage of everything that happened. And perhaps he understood she felt safer with me now. The first evening Emma moved into my house, she wandered slowly through the kitchen, smiling softly. "It feels peaceful here." I laughed quietly. "That's because nobody's yelling." Emma smiled faintly. Then her expression turned serious. "Grandma, yes. Why didn't you ever fight back?" The question lingered between us heavily. I thought about it carefully before answering. Because when you love people deeply, you keep hoping they'll notice your pain without being forced to. Emma looked down sadly. "But they didn't." "No," I admitted softly. "They didn't." That night, after Emma went to bed, I sat alone on the back porch, staring at the lake, while memories drifted endlessly through my mind. Michael laughing beside the grill. Ryan running barefoot through the grass as a child. Family birthdays. Christmas mornings. All the beautiful moments that existed before pride and ambition slowly poisoned everything. Olivia stepped outside, quietly carrying 2 cups of tea. "You look tired," she said gently. "I am." She sat beside me. "The board approved the Harper Foundation proposal this morning." I smiled faintly. The foundation. My next chapter. A week after the gala, I made a decision that surprised even me. Instead of pouring my energy into revenge or corporate politics, I created a foundation dedicated to elderly individuals abandoned or neglected by family. Transportation assistance, emergency housing, legal protection, mental health support. Thousands of older people across America were quietly suffering in loneliness, while families pretended nothing was wrong. I knew that pain now. Personally. "Applications are already coming in," Olivia said softly. I closed my eyes briefly. "So many more than you'd expect." That hurt deeply, because it meant my story wasn't rare, just visible. A month later, the foundation officially opened its first support center in Oklahoma City. The media coverage exploded quickly after the gala story leaked publicly. At first, I hated the attention. But then letters began arriving. Hundreds of them. Widows abandoned emotionally by children. Retired fathers ignored until their money disappeared. Grandparents sleeping in tiny back rooms while families treated them like burdens. One handwritten letter simply said, "Thank you for saying out loud what many of us are too ashamed to admit." I cried after reading that one, not because it was dramatic, because it was true. Meanwhile, Ryan worked quietly at the Tulsa distribution center. No special treatment, no shortcuts. Employees watched him carefully at first, knowing exactly who he was and what happened. Some judged him harshly, others pitied him. But over time, stories slowly started reaching me. Ryan staying late to help warehouse workers. Ryan covering shifts when drivers got sick. Ryan personally apologizing to older employees he once ignored. Not performative gestures, Quiet ones, the kind nobody posts online, the kind that matter. One evening, Ryan arrived at my house unexpectedly carrying a cardboard box. "What's this?" I asked. He looked strangely nervous. I cleaned out the storage room. My chest tightened immediately. Inside the box sat all the things Nicole once shoved beside my bed. Family photographs, old recipe books, Michael's leather jacket, even the handmade birthday cards Ryan gave me when he was little. "I found these shoved behind Christmas decorations," he whispered shamefully. I touched the edge of one old photograph carefully. A younger version of Ryan sitting proudly on Michael's shoulders. Happy, loved, safe. "I'm sorry," he said again quietly. I looked at my son for a very long time, then finally answered honestly. "I know you are," and for the first time since the night at the gas station. I believed him. 1 year later, I found myself standing once again at the same gas station off Interstate 40, where my life changed forever. The wind felt colder than I remembered, or perhaps memory simply makes certain places heavier. The old station looked almost exactly the same. Flickering overhead lights, faded signs, endless highway stretching across Oklahoma like a scar through the earth. But this time, I wasn't alone. Tyler stood beside me, holding 2 paper coffee cups and grinning nervously. "I still can't believe you actually came back here," he said. I smiled softly. Some places deserve closure. A lot had changed in a year. Tyler no longer worked night shifts at the gas station. The Harper Foundation scholarship program helped him return to college full-time, and now he was studying social work at Oklahoma State University. He wanted to help families dealing with elder neglect and financial hardship. Funny how one moment of kindness can completely redirect a life. "You know," Tyler said thoughtfully, "the manager still tells people about the night you were here." I laughed quietly. "I'm sure the story gets more dramatic every time." "Oh, absolutely," he admitted. "Last month he told someone there were helicopters involved." That made me laugh harder than I expected. A year ago, I didn't think I would laugh easily again. But healing surprises people sometimes. Not because pain disappears, because eventually it stops controlling every room inside your heart. A convoy of silver-lined freight trucks rumbled down the highway in the distance, silver logos glowing beneath the afternoon sunlight. I watched them quietly. For decades, those trucks represented sacrifice to me, then betrayal. Now, they simply represented survival. The company had changed too over the past year. Not financially, morally. After the Gala Silver Line implemented elder care leave policies, expanded employee family support programs, and partnered directly with the Harper Foundation, Charles Whitmore insisted the company should stand for more than profit. For once, corporate speeches actually became action. And Ryan changed the most, not overnight. Real redemption never happens dramatically. It happens through small choices repeated consistently over time. He kept working at the Tulsa distribution center without complaint. No shortcuts, no special treatment. He arrived early, stayed late, helped warehouse crews, took responsibility when problems happened instead of shifting blame downward. At first, employees assumed it was temporary, a performance. But eventually, even the harshest critics noticed something important. Ryan had stopped trying to impress people and started trying to become someone better instead. 6 months ago, one of the warehouse supervisors called me privately. "You should know something," he said. "What your son stayed overnight during the tornado warnings last week because he refused to leave the drivers alone." That conversation made me cry after I hung up. Not because Ryan became perfect, because compassion had finally returned to him. The boy Michael and I raised wasn't gone after all, just buried beneath years of ego and pressure and misplaced ambition. Tyler handed me one of the coffees. "You okay?" I nodded slowly, just thinking. "About that night?" "Yes." I stared across the empty parking lot where I once stood abandoned, and shaking beside dying fluorescent lights. I thought my life was over here. Tyler looked surprised. Really, I smiled faintly. When your own family stops seeing your worth, it changes something inside you. He nodded quietly. But maybe I continued softly. Sometimes painful endings force necessary beginnings. My phone buzzed gently inside my coat pocket. A message from Ryan. Running late. Emma insisted on stopping for pie. Sorry. Love you, Mom. Love you, Mom. Simple words. Yet there was a time I thought I might never hear them sincerely again. A few minutes later, Ryan's truck pulled into the station parking lot. Not an executive luxury SUV anymore. Just a normal pickup truck covered in Oklahoma dust. Emma jumped out first. Grandma? She hugged me tightly while Ryan approached more slowly, carrying a small bakery box. Peach pie, he explained awkwardly. Emma said the diner back there still makes your favorite. I looked at my son carefully. There were more gray hairs now, more lines around his eyes, less arrogance, more peace. The transformation wasn't physical. It was human. You didn't have to do that, I said softly. I wanted to. That difference mattered. Ryan glanced around the station quietly. I still think about this place all the time. I nodded. So do I. He swallowed hard. I can't believe I left you here. The guilt still lived inside him. Maybe it always would. Some mistakes become permanent teachers. I stepped closer carefully. Ryan, he looked at me. You are not the worst thing you've ever done. His eyes filled instantly. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Then Emma suddenly smiled mischievously. Well, she announced, this is officially the saddest gas station in America. The three of us laughed unexpectedly. Real laughter. Warm laughter. The kind families lose when pride replaces honesty. As the sun slowly lowered across the Oklahoma sky, we sat together outside the station drinking coffee and eating peach pie from paper plates. Simple, messy, peaceful. The way real healing often looks. No dramatic speeches, no perfect endings. Just people choosing each other again, one honest moment at a time. Later that evening, after Tyler left for campus and Emma wandered inside to buy snacks, Ryan and I stood quietly beside the old parking lot. I spent so many years chasing success, he admitted softly. And I almost lost the people who mattered most. I looked toward the highway thoughtfully. Success isn't dangerous, I said. Forgetting your humanity is. He nodded slowly. I understand that now. And finally, I believed him. A long silence settled comfortably between us. Then Ryan asked the question I think he feared for an entire year. Do you think Dad would forgive me? The ache that question created nearly stole my breath. I looked toward the endless Oklahoma horizon before answering carefully. Your father believed people should be judged by what they choose after failure. Ryan's eyes burned with emotion. So no, I said softly. He wouldn't be proud of what you did. Ryan lowered his head. But I continued gently. I think he'd be proud that you finally chose to become better afterward. Tears slipped silently down his face. This time, he didn't hide them. And neither did I. Because sometimes families don't heal by pretending pain never happened. Sometimes they heal by finally telling the truth. Completely. As another line of silver-lined trucks rolled down the highway behind us, I realized something important. I was no longer the abandoned woman standing alone in the dark, waiting for someone to come back. I had found my voice again, my dignity again, my peace again, and perhaps most importantly, I had finally remembered my own worth long before anyone else did. Life lesson. Sometimes the deepest pain in life does not come from strangers. It comes from the people we sacrificed everything for. Many parents spend decades giving love, support, money, time, and protection to their children, only to slowly become invisible as they grow older. But this story is a reminder that your value does not disappear simply because someone fails to recognize it. Respect should never depend on wealth, age, status, or usefulness. And love without kindness is not really love at all. Family is not defined by who shares your name. It is defined by who sees your humanity, even when you have nothing left to offer them. At the same time, this story is also about redemption. People can change, but only when they stop defending their behavior and finally face the truth about themselves. Ryan could not undo what he did, but he could decide what kind of man he would become afterward. And sometimes, healing begins the moment pride finally ends. If this story touched your heart, I'd truly love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever felt overlooked or unappreciated by someone you loved? Or have you ever had to learn a painful lesson about family and forgiveness? Please share your story below and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world right now. If you believe stories about family healing, second chances, and emotional truth matter, don't forget to like and subscribe so we can continue this journey together.